The scratching sound was not mechanical. That was the first thing Will realized as he surfaced from the heavy chemical sleep, induced by the ventilation filters of Gleamspire. It did not sound like the rhythmic thrum of a maglev train passing on the upper rails, nor the metallic groan of the thermal expansion joints settling for the night. It was a desperate, wet, organic sound like bone scraping against ionized glass. Will groaned and rolled over, burying his face in a pillow that smelled faintly of ozone and stale laundry detergent. He reached out blindly with his left hand, his fingers brushing the cold surface of the nightstand, until he found the haptic interface of his alarm. He tapped it twice to silence a wake-up call that had not yet happened. "Kettle," Will croaked, his voice thick with sleep. "Status report. Are the rats back in the conduits?" The household AI embedded somewhere in the ceiling plaster replied with a voice that was aggressively cheerful for 3 in the morning. "Negative, Will. Biometric scanners detect no rodent infestation. However, external audio sensors are picking up an anomaly on the balcony. Proximity alert immediate." Will sat up, blinking against the gloom. The apartment was a small utilitarian box, located on level 112 of the spire, high enough to be expensive, low enough to be covered in the perpetual grime of the city's smog layer. The only light came from the blinking red standby LED of the nutrient synthesizer in the kitchenette, and the pale, toxic glow of the neon billboards filtering through the heavy curtains. The scratching came again, louder, more frantic. He threw the covers off, swinging his legs out of bed. The floor was cold. He grabbed his multi-tool from the nightstand, a habit from 10 years of working high-maintenance jobs, where things exploded without warning, and moved toward the balcony door. "Kettle dim external opacity to 50%, Will ordered. The smart glass of the balcony door shifted from opaque to translucent. Will squinted. At first he saw nothing but the swirling gray mist of the city clouds and the distant strobing lights of the traffic lanes. Then, a small dark shape slammed against the glass, sliding down before scrabbling frantically to find purchase. It was not a bird. It was not a drone. Will unlocked the seal and shoved the heavy sliding door open. The wind of the spire roared in instantly, a gale-force draft that smelled of burnt copper and rain. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of millions of lives, living and dying in the vertical city below. "Help!" a voice squeaked, barely audible over the wind. Will looked down. Hanging from the lower rail of the balcony, dangling over a drop of 3,000 feet, was a child. Or at least it looked like a child. He was small, perhaps the size of a human 6-year-old, but his skin was covered in fine matted fur that looked like wet velvet. A long, ringed tail lashed wildly in the empty air, trying to find a counterweight. Large, triangular ears were flattened against a skull that was too wide, too predatory for a human, yet the eyes, wide, terrified, and glowing with a faint violet luminescence, were filled with a sapient, intelligent fear. He was slipping. The metal of the railing was slick with the condensation of the cloud layer. "Hold on!" Will shouted, his instinct overriding his confusion. He dropped the multi-tool and lunged forward. The wind whipped his hair into his eyes. He grabbed the railing with one hand to anchor himself and reached down with the other. That was when he saw the cut. It was not rust. It was not structural fatigue. The steel of the support stanchion, right where the child was clinging, had been sliced. The edge was clean, cauterized, and still faintly warm to the touch. A plasma cutter. Someone had sawed through the bolt, knowing that the slightest weight would snap it. This was not a tragic accident. It was a trap. The metal groaned. The bolt sheared. The section of railing the child was holding swung outward, detaching from the balcony floor. The child screamed a high, piercing sound that sounded more like a tea kettle than a human cry, and fell backward into the abyss. "No," Will roared. He did not think. He did not calculate the physics. He threw himself over the edge of the safe zone, his stomach slamming against the concrete lip of the balcony floor. His right hand shot out, his fingers hooking into the fabric of the child's tunic just as gravity took hold. The jerk nearly dislocated Will's shoulder. He grunted teeth, grit his boots scrambling for traction on the wet balcony tiles behind him. He was hanging half out of the spire, staring down into the endless glowing canyon of the city. Far below, the traffic looked like streams of liquid fire. If he let go, they would both be nothing but a smear on a corporate windshield in 10 seconds. The child looked up at him. The violet eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of terror and shock. He weighed surprisingly little, his bones, likely hollow or avian in structure, but the leverage was against Will. "Do not let go," the child whispered, his voice trembling. "Please." "I haven't had my coffee yet," Will grunted, straining to pull them both up. "I don't drop things before coffee. It's a rule." Will kicked his legs, finding the lip of the doorframe with his heel. He heaved, his biceps burning. Slowly, agonizingly, he dragged the child upward. The wind battered them, trying to peel them off the building, but Will was a mechanic. He knew how to hold on to things that wanted to fly away. With one final lung-burning effort, Will hauled the child over the concrete lip and collapsed onto the balcony floor. He rolled onto his back, gasping for air, the adrenaline crashing through his system like a drug. The child scrambled away from the edge, pressing his back against the glass of the sliding door, his chest heaving. He was shivering violently. Will sat up, rubbing his shoulder. He looked at the broken railing swinging in the wind. The cut marks were unmistakable now. Precision work, military grade. "Kettle," Will said, his voice breathless. "Seal the balcony. Emergency shutters. Now." "Compliance," the AI chirped. Heavy blast shutters slammed down over the glass, cutting off the roar of the wind and the sight of the drop, plunging them into the safety of the apartment. Will stood up, his knees shaking slightly. He looked at the intruder. The boy was huddled in a ball, his tail wrapped around his nose. He was soaked to the bone, his fur spiked with moisture. He wore a tunic made of a material Will did not recognize, something that shimmered like oil on water, torn and stained with grease. "You okay, kid?" Will asked, stepping closer. The boy flinched, baring small, needle-sharp teeth. A low growl emanated from his throat, a sound that vibrated in Will's own chest cavity. "I'm not going to hurt you," Will said, raising his hands. "I just pulled you out of the sky. Remember." The boy stared at him, assessing. Slowly, the growl faded, replaced by the chattering of teeth. He was freezing. Will sighed. "Right. Warmth first. Questions later." He went to the linen closet and pulled out a thick thermal blanket. He tossed it to the boy, who caught it with reflexes that were too fast for a human. The boy sniffed the fabric suspiciously, before wrapping it around himself, creating a cocoon where only two violet eyes and the tip of a twitching ear were visible. "Warning!" Kettle announced, the voice projecting from the ceiling speakers. "Unauthorized biological entity detected. Species unknown. Threat assessment calculating. Moral assessment. You have just acquired a dependent will. My logic processors suggest your bank account cannot support this acquisition." "Shut up, Kettle," Will muttered, walking to the kitchenette. He tapped the command for hot protein broth. "He's not a pet. He's a guest." "Guests usually use the front door," Kettle retorted. "And guests usually do not have plasma burns on their clothing." Will paused. He looked back at the boy. Kettle was right. The shimmering tunic was scorched along the hem. "Who are you?" Will asked, handing the steaming mug of broth to the boy. "And who wanted you to fall?" The boy took the mug with both hands. His fingers were tipped with retractable claws that clicked softly against the ceramic. He took a sip, his eyes closing for a moment in relief. When he opened them, the fear was still there, but it was masked by a deep, ancient exhaustion. "They call me the Crownling," the boy whispered. He looked at Will, and for a second the violet light in his eyes pulsed brighter. "But I am just small." "Crownling," Will repeated. It sounded like a title from a bad fantasy novel, the kind they sold in the data kiosks on the lower levels. "Okay. Do you have a name? A real one?" The boy hesitated. He looked at the blast shutters as if he could see through the steel to the danger outside. Names are heavy. If I give it to you, you carry it. Will crouched down so he was eye level with the kid. I'm already carrying a mortgage on this apartment and a bad back. I can handle a name. The boy lowered the mug. He looked at Will's hands, calloused, scarred, stained with engine grease. Then he looked at Will's face. Pip, the boy said softly. My mother called me Pip. Pip, Will said. Short. I like it. I'm Will. Will, Pip tested the word. You are the mechanic. I am a mechanic, Will corrected. There are a lot of us. No, Pip shook his head. The railing. You saw the cut. You knew it was a machine wound. Will stiffened. Yeah, I saw it. Which means someone didn't just want you dead. They wanted it to look like an accident. Who is chasing you, Pip? Before Pip could answer, the lights in the apartment flickered. It wasn't a brownout. The spire's power grid was nuclear stable. This was different. The hum of the refrigerator died. The standby lights on the console winked out. Even the ambient glow of the city outside seemed to retreat from the edges of the shutters. A silence descended. It was not just the absence of noise. It was the active suppression of it. A heavy, static pressure filled the air, making Will's ears pop. He felt a vibration in his teeth, a low-frequency resonance that made his vision blur at the edges. Kettle, Will called out. The AI did not respond. The speakers were dead. Pip gasped. He dropped the mug. It shattered on the floor, but the sound was dull, muted, as if they were underwater. The boy curled in on himself, clutching his head. It is happening, Pip moaned. The null purr. I can't stop it. Null purr. Will moved toward him, but stopped when he saw the air around the boy rippling. It looked like heat haze distorting the space around Pip's small body. They are looking for the signal, Pip cried out, his voice sounding distorted, synthesized. Do not let them take me. Do not let them file me away. Who Will demanded, reaching out to steady the boy. The debt hunters, Pip sobbed. And the queens, Will grabbed Pip's shoulder. Hey, look at me. Breathe. The moment Will's skin touched the boy's shoulder, a shockwave of energy blasted through the room. It wasn't painful, but it was blinding. Will felt a searing heat on the back of his right hand, the hand that was touching Pip. He yanked his hand back with a hiss. On the back of his hand, glowing beneath the skin in a pattern of intricate geometric lines, was a mark. It looked like a circuit board woven into a Celtic knot pulsing with the same violet light as Pip's eyes. What did you do to me? Will stared at his hand. The light was fading, settling into a dull, bruised tattoo, but he could feel it humming, connecting directly to his nervous system. Pip stared at the mark, his mouth open. The distortion field, the null purr, suddenly retracted, snapping back into the boy's body. The lights in the apartment flickered back on. The refrigerator hummed. System reboot complete, Kettle's voice cut in, sounding glitches and confused. Error code 770. Power surge detected. Will, why is your heart rate at 140 beats per minute? You anchored it, Pip whispered, staring at Will with a look of absolute awe. The noise. You made it stop. Will rubbed the back of his hand. The skin felt feverish. I didn't do anything. I just touched you. That is what an anchor does, Pip said, his voice sounding older now, more composed. You grounded the frequency. Now they will know where I am. Will stood up, his mind racing. He walked to the door, checking the manual deadbolts. Okay, that sounds bad. We need to call sector security. If someone is hunting a kid with whatever that was, this is way above my pay grade. He reached for the wall comms unit. No, Pip scrambled up the blanket, trailing behind him. No security. They are bought. The man with the metal jaw pays them. Will paused, his hand hovering over the call button. The man with the metal jaw. The specificity of the detail chilled him. Who is the man with the metal jaw, Pip? Rafe. Pip spat the name like a curse. He wants the null purr. He says he can sell the silence. Will lowered his hand. He looked at the terrified alien child, then at the cut railing outside the shutters, and finally at the glowing brand on his hand. If he called security, and they were on the payroll of this Rafe character, he would be handing the kid over to his executioners, and likely his own. Okay, Will said, exhaling a breath he didn't know he was holding. No security. You promise? Pip asked. I promise, Will said. But you need to tell me everything. Start with motion detected. Kettle interrupted the AI's voice, devoid of its usual sarcasm. Corridor Sector 4. 3 distinct thermal signatures approaching. Will froze. Neighbors. Negative, Kettle said. Heart rates are synchronized. Step patterns are tactical. They are moving with military cadence. They have bypassed the outer building scanners. Will swore softly. He rushed to the kitchenette and pulled a drawer open, retrieving the only weapon he owned, a heavy-duty industrial wrench. It wasn't much, but it could crack a skull if swung hard enough. Pip, get behind the sofa, Will ordered. The boy obeyed instantly, diving behind the synthetic leather couch, peering over the top with wide eyes. Kettle engage privacy mode. Lock the door. Max tension on the mag seals, Will commanded. Door is sealed, Kettle confirmed. However, thermal readings indicate they are carrying shape charges. A mag seal will not hold against breaching explosives. Will stood in the center of the room, facing the heavy steel door of his apartment. The hallway outside was usually silent at this hour, save for the occasional drunk stumbling home. Now there was a sound. Click-clack, click-clack. It was the sound of hard boots on metal grating, but there was a rhythm to it that was terrifyingly precise. 3 sets of feet moving as one entity. They stopped right outside his door. Will tightened his grip on the wrench. His palm was sweating. The mark on the back of his hand began to itch. Through the digital peephole on the door control panel, Will watched as the sensors rendered the visitors. They were not sector security. They were not police. They were women, tall, lithe, and terrifying. The one in the center, the leader, presumably wore a coat of matte black armor plates that articulated like insect chitin. She stood perfectly still, her face obscured by the shadows of the hallway, but Will could see the triangular silhouette of feline ears twitching atop her head. Her eyes glowed a pale, icy blue through the grain of the camera feed. To her left was a woman who was visibly larger, her armor bulky and scarred, painted in aggressive reds and oranges. She leaned against the wall, casually cleaning a fingernail with a knife that looked sharp enough to cut gravity. To the right was the third slimmer, wearing a visor that covered her eyes and a harness filled with blinking electronic tools. She was tapping the air, interfacing with an invisible console. "They are hacking the door lock," Kettle whispered. "Firewall breached in 3-2." The door chime rang. It was a polite, cheerful sound that clashed violently with the tension in the room. "Open the door, William Vance," a voice spoke from the hallway. It was the woman in the center. Her voice was cool, smooth, and utterly devoid of mercy. It sounded like a glacier cracking. Will didn't move. "I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. Go away." "We are not merchants," the woman replied. "And we do not knock twice." "They have weapons," Pip whispered from behind the couch. "That is Seraphine. She is the ice. She does not miss." "Great," Will muttered. "I love a specialist." "The lock is disengaging," Kettle warned. "I cannot stop them. Their decryption algorithm is elegant." The heavy steel bolts of the door began to slide back with a groan of defeat. Clunk, clunk, clunk. Will raised the wrench, knowing how ridiculous he looked. A mechanic against a hit squad. The door hissed and slid open. The 3 women stood there, framed by the harsh fluorescent light of the corridor. Now that they were visible, Will could see the inhuman grace in their posture. They were Iluwari, the feline warrior caste from the outer systems. He had only seen them in news vids. In person, they were mesmerizing and terrifying. Their tails swayed behind them in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Seraphine, the leader, stepped over the threshold. She didn't even look at the wrench in Will's hand. She looked straight at him, her blue eyes narrowing as she scanned his biometrics. "You have 10 seconds to explain why you are harboring a fugitive of the crown," Seraphine said. The large one, the red armored brawler, stepped in next. She sniffed the air. "It smells like fear in here. And cheap coffee." She grinned, revealing canines that were definitely not human. "I like the fear part." The tech specialist entered last, closing the door behind them and locking it with a casual wave of her hand. Will stood his ground, though his knees wanted to buckle. "He fell. I caught him. That's the whole story." Seraphine's gaze shifted to the back of the sofa. "Come out, Crownling. Hiding is beneath your station." Pip stood up slowly. He was trembling, but he held his head high. "Go away, Seraphine. I am not going back to the cage." "The cage keeps you safe," Seraphine said. "And it keeps the silence contained." She turned her eyes back to Will, and for the first time, she noticed the glowing mark on his hand. Her eyes widened, just a fraction. A flicker of something surprise anger crossed her face. "You touched him," Seraphine said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "He was falling," Will said defensively. "I grabbed him." "You initiated a bond," the tech specialist said, her voice soft, melodic but sharp. She adjusted her visor. "Unregistered resonance. High fidelity. Seraphine, this complicates the extraction." "It complicates nothing," Seraphine said coldly. She took a step toward Will, her hand dropping to the hilt of a curved blade at her hip. "Break the link. Hand over the child human, or I will remove the hand that holds him." Will looked at Pip. The boy looked back, his violet eyes filled with a desperate plea. Will tightened his grip on the wrench. He was a maintenance worker. He fixed things. He didn't break them, and he certainly didn't throw them away when they were in trouble. "No," Will said. The word hung in the air. The red armored woman laughed. "Oh, I like him. Can I keep him, or at least break him a little?" Pip stepped out from behind the couch. He moved to stand behind Will's leg, peering around his calf. A low, vibrating sound began to build in the boy's chest. It wasn't the null purr this time. It was a warning. "Stay back," Pip growled. As the growl hit the air, the electronic lock on the door behind the women sparked and died. The lights in the hallway outside exploded. The smart glass of the balcony shutters turned pitch black. The apartment was plunged into the gray gloom of the city, once more lit only by the violet glow of Pip's eyes and the blue fire of Seraphine's gaze. "Variable identified," Seraphine murmured, drawing her blade with a sound like singing steel. "The hard way it is." The standoff in the cramped living room of apartment 112B was a study in ridiculous contrasts. On one side stood the Feral Court, three apex predators encased in kinetic armor that cost more than the entire building block, moving with a grace that made gravity look like a mere suggestion. On the other side stood Will, a man wearing grease-stained cargo pants and a t-shirt that said Gleam Spire Maintenance. "We keep it up," holding a rusted industrial wrench with white-knuckled desperation. The air conditioner hummed, rattling in the vent, the only sound daring to intrude upon the silence. Seraphine, the woman with the ice-blue eyes and the terrifyingly still posture, did not blink. Her curved blade, forged from some dark, non-reflective alloy, was held low at her side, not threatening, but ready. It was the readiness that terrified Will more than any overt aggression. It was the stance of someone who did not need to threaten because the outcome was already a mathematical certainty in her mind. "I will say this once more, human," Seraphine said, her voice a smooth, cold contralto that seemed to lower the room temperature by 5 degrees. "Step aside. The Crownling is an unstable isotope. You are holding a grenade with the pin pulled." Will shifted his weight, putting himself more firmly between the women and the trembling boy behind him. "His name is Pip," Will said, his voice surprisingly steady, despite the fact that his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "And usually when people come to defuse a grenade, they don't bring swords. They bring a disposal team. You look like a hit squad." The woman on the left, the large one in the red and orange assault armor, laughed. It was a bark of a sound sharp and amused. She stepped forward, ignoring the tension line Seraphine had drawn. She looked around the apartment with unabashed, critical judgment, her nose wrinkling as she sniffed the air. "This is it," she asked, her voice raspy and loud. She kicked a pile of dirty laundry near the door with a heavy, armored boot. "This is where you live. It smells like ozone and despair. And is that stale noodles?" "Nixara, maintain perimeter focus," Seraphine snapped, though she didn't look away from Will. Nixara ignored her leader. She walked to the wall, running a gloved finger over the peeling synthetic wallpaper. "I have seen nicer cells in the isolation ward. This is your den, human. Really." "Don't insult the den," Will snapped back, the mechanic in him offended despite the mortal peril. "It has walls. It has a roof. It keeps the acid rain out. That is more than most people in the spire get." Nixara turned to him, grinning. Her teeth were white and sharp, her eyes a burning amber. "It has walls," she mocked, mimicking his tone. "Cute. Walls are just obstacles waiting to be breached." "Enough," said the third woman, Kala. She stepped out from behind Seraphine's shoulder. She was different from the other two. Her armor was sleeker, woven with blinking circuitry and interface nodes. She wore a visor that covered her eyes, a band of black glass that displayed scrolling streams of data in pale green light. She didn't move with the predatory stalk of Seraphine or the hulking aggression of Nixara. She moved like a ghost in the machine, quiet, observational, precise. She walked straight toward Will. Will raised the wrench higher. "Do not swing that," Kala said softly. Her voice was melodic, lacking the harsh edge of the others. "You will dislocate your shoulder before you hit me, and then I will have to reset it. It is a waste of time for both of us." She stopped, 2 feet from him. She wasn't looking at his face. She was looking at his hand, the hand that had grabbed Pip, the hand that now bore the glowing geometric brand. "Seraphine," Kala said, tilting her head. "Look at the resonance signature." Seraphine finally broke eye contact with Will to look at his hand. Her eyes narrowed. "I see it. A contamination mark." "No," Kala corrected, reaching out. Will flinched, but she didn't touch him. She hovered her hand inches above his, her fingers dancing in the air, as if manipulating invisible threads. "It is not contamination. It is a circuit, a complete loop." She tapped the side of her visor. The boy did not just touch him. The boy integrated with him. Look at the biofeedback. The human's nervous system is acting as a grounding wire for the null pur. Pip, peering out from behind Will's leg, let out a low hiss. "She sees," Pip whispered. "She sees the lines." Nixara scoffed, leaning against the kitchenette counter and picking up an apple from a bowl. She examined it suspiciously before taking a massive bite, crunching loudly. "So he is a ground wire. Cut the wire. Problem solved. We grab the kid, we go. I am hungry and this apple tastes like wet cardboard." "If you cut the wire now," Kala said, her voice turning hard, "the feedback loop will snap. The crownling's mind will shatter, and the human's heart will likely stop from the neuroshock." Silence descended on the room again. Will looked at the mark on his hand, then at Kala. "So, let me get this straight. If you take him, I die. If I keep him, you kill me. Is there a third option where nobody dies and you three leave my apartment?" Seraphine sheathed her blade. The sound was a sharp click that signaled a shift in tactics, not a surrender. She crossed her arms over her chest. "There is no option where we leave William Vance. Not yet." "How do you know my name?" Will asked. "Your mailbox is digital and your firewall is pathetic," Kettle's voice suddenly boomed from the ceiling, speakers startling Nixara into dropping the half-eaten apple. I tried to stop them, Will. But their intrusion software is rude. Highly effective, but rude. An AI, Kala noted, looking up at the sensors. Primitive, but functional. I am a Class 4 domestic management system, Kettle protested indignantly. I can toast bread to 400 different shades of brown. That is not primitive. Quiet, Kettle, Will muttered. He looked at Seraphine. Okay. You know who I am. You know I'm just a maintenance guy. Why are you really here? You said rescue earlier, but you kicked my door in. We did not kick it, Seraphine said calmly. We overrode it. And we are here because the Crownling Pip, as you call him, is a beacon. Every second he stays here, he broadcasts a signal. Not a radio wave. A resonance. A psychic scream that only our kind and the machines built to hunt us can hear. She stepped closer, her height imposing. We are the feral court. We do not answer to the Spire's laws. We answer to the biological imperative of our species. That child is a mutation, a dangerous one. If the debt hunters catch him, they will vivisect him to see what makes the silence happen. If we take him to the deep enclaves. We isolate him. We keep him safe. By locking him up, Will challenged. By removing the variable, Seraphine corrected. Safety is containment. That sounds like prison with better PR, Will retorted. You are annoying, Nixara grumbled, wiping apple juice from her chin. Seraphine let me hit him. Just once, softly, to reset his attitude. Negative, Seraphine said. Kala says the bond is lethal to break. We are stuck. Stuck, Will repeated. What does stuck mean? It means, Seraphine said, her eyes flashing, that until we can figure out how to untie your nervous system from the child's resonance without killing you both, we cannot move him, and we cannot leave him here undefended. She looked around the apartment with disdain. Which means, unfortunately, we are staying. Will's jaw dropped. What? No. Absolutely not. This is a one-bedroom apartment. I have one bathroom. I have one towel. You are not staying. We are not asking for a lease, human, Seraphine said. We are commandeering a tactical position. This isn't a tactical position. Will waved his arms. It's my living room. I have work in the morning. I have to fix the hydraulic pumps on level 90. Not tomorrow, you don't, Nixara said, moving to the window. She tapped the blast shutters. Because if you step outside, Rafe Calder's drones will turn you into pink mist before you can punch your time card. The mention of the name made the room go cold. Rafe, Will said. Pip mentioned him, the man with the metal jaw. He is a debt hunter, Seraphine said. But that is a polite term. He is a butcher who works for the corporations. He hunts anomalies. And right now, you and the boy are the most expensive anomalies in the sector. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine cut through the air. It was barely audible on the edge of human hearing, but to the Aluari women, it was like a siren. Nixara's ears flattened against her skull. Seraphine spun around her blade, reappearing in her hand as if by magic. Contact, Seraphine hissed. Ventilation shaft. North wall. Will looked at the vent cover near the ceiling. The rats, no, Nixara snarled. She launched herself off the kitchenette counter. It happened in a blur. The vent cover exploded inward. A small, dark object shot out, moving with the erratic buzzing speed of a hornet. It was a micro-drone no bigger than a thumb, but equipped with a camera lens that glowed a malevolent red. It zipped around the room, scanning faces. It locked onto Pip. Pip screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was the null purr. The lights in the apartment exploded. Not just flickered, the bulbs shattered, raining glass down onto the carpet. The refrigerator died with a heavy clunk. Kettle's speaker emitted a dying screech before going silent. Will felt the pressure in his skull again, the heavy underwater silence that drowned out the world. He fell to his knees, clutching his head. The drone caught in the interference field began to wobble. Its rotors sputtered. Nyxara was already in the air. She moved with a gravity-defying leap, pushing off the back of the sofa. She didn't use a weapon. She used her hand. She snatched the drone out of the air, her armored gauntlet crushing it instantly. She landed in a crouch, sparks flying from the crushed metal in her fist. The null purr faded as Pip collapsed, sliding down the wall, exhausted. The emergency backup lights dim, amber strips along the floor flickered on. "Clear," Nyxara announced, tossing the smoking debris onto Will's coffee table. "Spy unit. Model 7X. Cheap but fast." Will gasped for air, the pressure lifting from his brain. He looked at Pip. The boy was curled up again, shivering violently. Calla was moving before Will could. She knelt beside Pip, her hands glowing with a soft green light from her gauntlets. She didn't grab him. She didn't restrain him. She placed her hands on the floor on either side of him, creating a perimeter of light. "Resonance stabilization," Calla murmured, her voice a soothing hum. "Breathe, little one. The noise is gone. You are the only sound in the room. Just you." It was a technique, a medical protocol. Will watched, stunned. These were killers, assassins. But Calla's voice was gentle, her movements devoid of any threat. She wasn't treating a target. She was comforting a child. Pip stopped shaking. He looked up at Calla, his eyes wide. "You do not hurt." "Not today," Calla said softly. She reached into a pouch on her belt and pulled out a small foil-wrapped bar. "Nutrient block. High calorie. Eat. Using the silence takes fuel." She handed it to him. Pip took it, sniffing it, then took a small bite. Will stood up, using the sofa for support. He looked at the three women. Seraphine was standing by the door, scanning the hallway through the peephole. Nyxara was dissecting the crushed drone with a knife. Calla was feeding the kid. "You're not just hitmen," Will said, his voice raspy. "Hitmen don't carry nutrient blocks for kids." Seraphine turned. The blue light from the emergency strips cast long shadows across her face. "We are the feral court, Will. We are the immune system of our species. Sometimes that means cutting out a tumor. Sometimes it means knitting a wound." "Which one are we?" Will asked. "Tumor or wound?" "That," Seraphine said, "remains to be seen." She walked to the center of the room. "Situation report. The drone transmitted for 2 seconds before the nullpur fried it. Rafe knows we are here. He knows the target is active. He does not know our numbers." "He will send a sweep team," Nyxara said, poking the drone entrails. "Standard protocol. 4 to 6 heavies. Breaching charges." "We cannot move the boy in this state," Calla said, standing up. "His bio readings are chaotic, and the bond with the human is still solidifying. If we move them into the open now, the stress could kill them both." Seraphine nodded. She looked at Will, "We hold the position. For 1 night. We let the boy stabilize. Calla, you analyze the bond. Find a way to sever it safely. Nyxara, you mine the door and the balcony." "Mine!" Will yelped. "You're putting explosives in my apartment." "Would you prefer Rafe comes in and asks politely?" Nyxara grinned. "I have some lovely sonic mines. They turn bones to jelly. Very little structural damage to your precious walls." "No jelly," Will said firmly. "And no killing unless they come through that door trying to kill us." Seraphine raised an eyebrow. "You are giving orders now, mechanic." "It's my house," Will said, finding a backbone he didn't know he had. He walked over to where Pip was eating. He sat down on the floor next to the boy. "And this is my guest. If we're doing this, if we're staying here, we play by my rules." "And what are your rules?" Seraphine asked, amused. "Rule 1, Will said, holding up a finger. No touching Pip unless I say it's okay. Or unless he says it's okay." "Agreed," Calla said immediately. Seraphine hesitated, then nodded. "Acceptable." "Rule 2, Will continued. You don't break anything you can't fix. That includes my coffee machine." Nyxara laughed. "I make no promises about the coffee machine." It looks like it belongs in a museum. Rule 3, Will said, looking Seraphine dead in the eye. If things go south, if Rafe comes, you protect the kid first. You don't use him as bait. You don't trade him. Seraphine stared at him. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind howling outside the blast shutters. We do not trade our own, Seraphine said quietly. That is the law of the court. Good, Will said. Then you can stay. For tonight. Generous, Seraphine said dryly. Nixara, secure the balcony. Kala, get the lights back on. I hate fighting in the dark. As the women moved to their tasks, the apartment transformed. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a forward operating base. Nixara was sticking small, disc-shaped devices to the window frame. Kala was interfacing with the fuse box, her visor scrolling rapid-fire code. System restoring, Kettle's voice crackled back to life. Power levels at 60%. Will, I must protest. The occupancy limit of this unit is 2 persons. We are currently at 5 distinct biological signatures. The oxygen scrubbers are going to be overworked. I suggest you charge them rent. Put it on my tab, Kettle, Will sighed. He stood up and walked into the kitchenette, needing something to do with his hands. He filled a pot with water to boil. The synthesizer was offline, so manual cooking was the only option. Kala appeared beside him, silent as a shadow. Will jumped slightly. Do you have a bell? You should wear a bell. That is a stereotype, Kala said, her lips twitching in what might have been a smile. She was looking at the drone parts on the counter again. But effective. She reached out and picked up a fragment of the drone's memory core. You surprised Seraphine. I doubt that, Will said, turning on the burner. She looks like she hasn't been surprised since the last century. She expected you to beg, Kala said. Or to run. Most humans do when they see us. We are designed to be frightening. It is part of the armor. I've worked in the lower levels, Will said, watching the water bubbles form. I've seen things scarier than you. Try fixing a sewage cycler when it's backed up. That's scary, Kala chuckled. It was a warm sound contrasting with the cold steel of her gear. She leaned against the counter, removing her visor. Will looked at her properly for the first time. Her eyes were not glowing like Seraphine's or burning like Nixara's. They were a deep, soft gold, flecked with green. They were tired eyes. You caught him, Kala said softly. At the railing. I saw the footage from the building sensors before we hacked the door. You threw yourself over the edge. Gravity does most of the work, Will shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. No, Kala said. She looked at his hand again, the one resting on the countertop. Most people would have let go when they saw the railing snap. Self-preservation is the strongest instinct. You overrode it. I'm a mechanic, Will said, as if that explained everything. When something is falling, you catch it. When something is broken, you fix it. You don't let it smash just because it's inconvenient. Is that what he is to you? Kala asked. Something broken. He's a kid, Will said. He's scared. That's enough. Kala looked at him, searching his face. She seemed to be measuring him not with sensors, but with intuition. You are strange, William Vance. You have a loud heart. Is that a medical condition? Will asked. No, Kala said. She reached out her finger, hovering near his arm. It means you feel things loudly. Nixara hears the fear. I hear the care. It is rare. She pulled her hand back before touching him. Thank you. For not letting him fall. Yeah, well, Will muttered, turning back to the boiling water. Don't thank me yet. We're still trapped in a box with a killer robot army outside. True, Kala said, putting her visor back on. The soft golden eyes disappeared behind the black glass. Speaking of which, she tapped her temple. My long-range scanners just pinged. It is faint, masked by the storm static. What is it? Will asked, feeling the dread coil in his stomach again. A death hunt signal, Kala said, her voice dropping all warmth. It is not a drone this time. It is a marking beacon. Someone is painting the building for a heavy assault. When? Will asked. Soon, Kala said. Very soon. From the living room, Nixara stood up from the balcony door. Seraphine, I have movement on the adjacent roof. Snipers. Seraphine drew her blade. Lights out, she commanded. Kala cut the power instantly. The apartment plunged into darkness again. Will, Seraphine's voice came from the shadows. Get the boy to the bathroom. It has the thickest walls. Stay down. Here we go, Will whispered to himself. He grabbed the pot of boiling water, a pathetic weapon but better than nothing, and moved toward Pip. Come on, kid, Will said, guiding the boy toward the bathroom. Bathtub time, no arguments. As he closed the bathroom door, he heard the first shot. It wasn't a bang. It was the sizzling crack of a plasma round melting through the blast shutter. The test had begun. The rain in the Gleamspire did not fall. It accumulated. It was a thick, oily condensation that slid down the reinforced glass of the balcony doors like tears on a dirty face. Inside apartment 112B, the atmosphere was thick enough to chew. Will Vance stood in his kitchenette, staring at the disassembled remains of his coffee maker. It was a brave machine that had survived 3 power surges and 1 gravity fluctuation, but it had not survived Nixara. I told you, Will said, his voice flat. It is delicate. You do not hit it to make it brew faster. Nixara, currently sharpening a combat knife that was longer than Will's forearm, shrugged from her perch on the back of his sofa. It was making a whining noise. I silenced it. It was brewing, Will corrected. Now it is dead, and I am uncaffeinated. This is a tactical disadvantage for everyone involved. Nixara smirked, revealing the tips of her elongated canines. She leaned forward, sniffing the air. Your heart beats loud, human. Thump, thump, thump. It sounds like a panicked bird trapped in a box. That is because I am alive, Will retorted, tossing a broken plastic valve into the trash. And because I have 3 intergalactic assassins in my living room who have weaponized my upholstery. Seraphine stood by the window, peering through a slit in the blast shutters. She was a statue of matte black armor, unmoving, barely breathing. Focus, she commanded, her voice cutting through the banter like a cold draft. The storm is masking the thermal sensors, but it will not hide us forever. We are exposed here. The boy is stable, Kala said softly. She was sitting on the floor rug, her legs crossed in a lotus position. Pip was asleep, with his head in her lap. The boy looked small, frail, his velvet fur matted with sweat. Kala's hands hovered over him, weaving patterns of green light that seemed to soothe his restless dreams. Stable is a relative term, Seraphine muttered. He is a time bomb, and the timer is ticking. The door chime rang. In an instant, the room transformed. Nixara vanished from the sofa, reappearing in the shadows of the hallway entrance, her knife held in a reverse grip. Seraphine drew her curved blade, the metal, making a soft, singing sound. Kala shielded Pip with her body, her visor dropping over her eyes. Will held up his hands. Wait, wait. That is probably breakfast. Breakfast does not announce itself, Seraphine hissed. It does when you ordered it from Nora down the hall because someone broke the kitchen appliances, Will said, shooting a glare at Nixara. He walked to the door, feeling the laser focus of 3 predators on his back. He checked the monitor. It was indeed Nora Penn, his neighbor from 112A. She was holding a steaming container of soy noodles, looking impatient. Will unlocked the manual deadbolt. He opened the door just a crack. Nora, Will said, forcing a smile. You are a lifesaver. You owe me 20 credits, Will, Nora said, trying to hand the bag through the crack. And tell Kettle to stop pinging my toaster. It's rude. I will put it on the tab, Will said, reaching for the bag. At that moment the door slipped. Maybe Will's hand was sweaty, or maybe the magnetic seal malfunctioned, but the heavy steel door swung open another 6 inches. It was enough. Nora looked past Will's shoulder. She saw the shattered remains of the coffee maker. Then she saw Nixara crouched in the shadows, glowing eyes fixed on her throat. She saw Seraphine's blade catching the dim light. Nora's face went pale. She didn't scream. People in the spire didn't scream. They calculated survival odds. "I delivered the food," Nora said, her voice trembling but fast. She shoved the bag into Will's chest. "I did not see anything. I was never here. Do not ask me to babysit. Do not ask me for sugar. Goodbye." She turned and sprinted down the hallway, her slippers slapping against the metal grating. Will closed the door and locked it. "Well," he said, turning back to the room. "There goes my reputation as a boring neighbor." "She saw us," Seraphine said, her eyes narrowing. "She is a loose end." "She is a nurse who works double shifts," Will said, walking to the table and setting the food down. "She doesn't care about alien politics. She cares about paying rent. She won't talk." "Everyone talks when the pain starts," Nixara said, standing up and sheathing her knife. She moved to the food bag. "I hope she brought extra spice packets." Will ignored her and walked back to the door to engage the secondary locks. As he reached for the handle, he stopped. There was something stuck to the metal, just below the peephole. It hadn't been there when he opened the door for Nora. It must have been placed there in the split second Nora was running away, or perhaps it had been there all morning invisible until the light hit it right. It was a small adhesive tag, a black circle with a jagged silver line running through it. Will felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He knew that symbol. Everyone in the lower sectors knew it. It was the mark of a debt hunter claim. It meant property pending. "Seraphine," Will said, his voice low. The tone made the Aluwari leader turn instantly. She was at his side in a heartbeat. She looked at the tag. "Rafe," she said. The name was a curse. "He was here?" Will asked. "No. If he was here, the door would be gone," Seraphine said, peeling the tag off with a gloved claw. She crushed it in her hand. "This is a psychological marker. He is telling us he can touch us. He is telling us the walls do not matter." "He is playing with his food," Nixara growled from the table. "I hate it when they play." "He is tightening the net," Calla said from the floor. Pip stirred in her lap, whimpering. "He knows we are dug in. He is waiting for a mistake." "We need to move," Will said. "If he knows exactly which door is mine." "He has known since last night, human," Seraphine said. "Moving now is suicide. The corridor is a kill box. Our best chance is to hold until the storm breaks, and our extraction ship can dock at the upper tier." "Extraction ship?" Will asked. "You didn't mention a ship." "You did not have clearance," Seraphine replied coolly. Suddenly, the vent cover above the kitchenette rattled. It was a small sound, barely audible over the wind outside. But in the tension of the room, it sounded like a gunshot. "Down!" Seraphine roared. She shoved Will hard, sending him crashing into the wall. The vent cover exploded. This was not a single scout drone. A swarm poured out black metallic insects the size of fists, buzzing with the angry whine of high RPM rotors. There were at least a dozen of them. They didn't scan. They attacked. Red lasers painted the room. "Suppressing fire!" Seraphine yelled. She raised her left gauntlet, and a pulse of blue energy erupted from her wrist, blasting 3 of the drones into shrapnel. Nixara was a blur of motion. She leaped onto the kitchen counter, flipping off the wall to intercept a cluster of drones. She didn't shoot. She slashed. Her knives moved so fast they were invisible, carving through metal and wire. Sparks showered down like fireworks. "Calla, shield the boy," Will shouted, scrambling to his feet. He grabbed a heavy metal tray from the table. Nora's noodle delivery went flying and swung it like a shield. A drone dived at him, a taser probe extending from its underbelly. Will batted it away with a clang that vibrated up his arm. "Kettle defense protocols!" Will screamed. "I am trying," the AI wailed. "They are jamming my frequencies. I cannot target them." Calla had pulled Pip into the corner, curling her body around him. Her armor flared with a golden energy shield, absorbing the stun bolts fired by the drones. "There are too many," Kala gritted out. "They are swarming." One drone slipped past Nyxara's defense. It zipped toward Pip, ignoring the chaos. It wasn't trying to kill. It was trying to tag. A syringe needle extended from its nose, dripping with a glowing blue liquid. Sedative. "No!" Will yelled. He abandoned his cover and lunged across the room. He wasn't fast enough. The drone was inches from Kala's shield. But then, the sound stopped. It wasn't that the drone stopped making noise. The concept of sound ceased to exist. Pip had opened his eyes. They were burning with a violet light so intense, it looked like a welding arc. His mouth opened in a silent scream. The null purr hit the room like a physical hammer. Will felt the air get sucked out of his lungs. The pressure in his ears was agonizing. The gravity seemed to shift the floor, tilting wildly in his perception. The drones simply dropped. Their rotors stopped spinning. Their lights died. Their circuitry, overwhelmed by the resonance-dampening field, fried instantly. They fell out of the air like stones clattering onto the floorboards. For 5 seconds, the silence was absolute. It was a silence that ate thought. Then Pip collapsed. The violet light in his eyes vanished. The pressure lifted, rushing back out of the room with a whoosh of air. Will fell to his knees, gasping. Nyxara landed heavily on the floor, shaking her head as if to clear water from her ears. Seraphine braced herself against the wall, her armor systems rebooting with a series of clicks. Pip, Will, crawled toward the corner. The boy was limp in Kala's arms. He was breathing, but it was shallow, ragged gasps. His skin was gray. "He overloaded," Kala said, her voice frantic. She stripped off her gauntlet and pressed her bare hand to Pip's forehead. "His temperature is dropping. He used too much. He burned his own life force to kill the machines." "Is he?" Will couldn't finish the sentence. "He is fading," Kala said. "He needs an anchor." "Will, give me your hand." Will scrambled forward. He grabbed Pip's small, cold hand. The bond on the back of Will's hand flared to life. It burned hot and angry. He felt a jolt of electricity run up his arm, slamming into his chest. It wasn't pain. It was connection. He felt Pip's fear. He felt the cold, dark void that the boy was sliding into. "Don't go," Will whispered. He squeezed the boy's hand. "You hear me. You don't have to be strong, Pip. You don't have to fight them. You just have to stay here, with me." He poured every ounce of his stubbornness, his mechanic's refusal, to let things break into that grip. "I have you. I am the ground wire. Dump the fear into me." Slowly, color began to return to Pip's cheeks. The ragged breathing smoothed out. The boy's eyelids fluttered. "Will," Pip whispered. His voice was a thread. "I'm here," Will said, his own voice cracking. "We're all here. You got them, kid. You got all of them." Pip squeezed Will's hand back weakly, then drifted into a natural, exhausted sleep. Will slumped against the wall, keeping his hand locked in Pip's. He looked up. The 3 women were staring at him. Nyxara had a cut on her cheek, bleeding purple blood. Seraphine's armor was scorched. But they weren't looking at the damage. They were looking at Will and Pip. "That was," Nyxara wiped the blood from her cheek. "That was a null purr of the 9th magnitude. It should have stopped his heart." "The human anchored him," Kala said softly. She looked at Will, with an expression he couldn't quite read, something like wonder, mixed with fear. "He took the recoil." Warning, Kettle's voice returned, sounding static-filled and gloomy. "Audio systems compromised. Also, there is a voice transmission incoming on the emergency frequency. It is overriding the firewall." "Put it through," Seraphine ordered, standing up and regaining her composure. The speakers crackled. A voice filled the room. It was smooth, rich, and terrifyingly calm. It sounded like expensive whiskey poured over broken glass. "Good morning, residents of 112B. Rafe," Will said. "Mr. Vance," Rafe Calder's voice continued. I apologize for the mess. My toys can be enthusiastic. I hope the boy is unharmed. He is delicate merchandise. He's not merchandise, Will said to the ceiling speakers. And you owe me a new coffee maker. A low chuckle echoed through the room. A sense of humor. I admire that. It is a rare quality in the Spire. But let us be practical. You are a mechanic, Will. You understand efficiency. You are besieged. You are outgunned. You are protecting a biological anomaly that threatens the stability of the entire sector. Give me the boy, Rafe said. The voice dropped an octave, becoming intimate, persuasive. Just the boy. The three ladies of the feral court can walk away. I have no quarrel with the Iluwari provided they leave my jurisdiction. And you, I will clear your debt record. I will deposit 100,000 credits into your account. You can move to the upper ring. You can see the sun. Will looked at the apartment. It was a wreck. Debris everywhere. Scorch marks on the walls. He looked at Pip sleeping vulnerably in Kala's arms. He looked at the 100,000 credits in his imagination, a life of ease of safety. Are you done? Will asked. It is a generous offer, Rafe said. It is the only offer. Will looked at Seraphine. She was waiting her hand on her sword. She expected him to fold. Humans always folded. Will looked back at the speaker. You're right. I'm a mechanic, and you know what we do when a part is defective. We replace it. But Pip isn't defective. Your soul is. Will took a breath. I also want peace. But you knocked on the wrong door, Rafe, and you broke my stuff. So no deal. Come and get us if you think you can afford the bill. There was a long silence on the line. Disappointing, Rafe said. His voice lost all warmth. But expected. Prepare yourself, Will. The rain is about to get much heavier. The connection cut with a sharp click. Will let out a long exhale and let his head thunk back against the wall. I probably shouldn't have antagonized the guy with the army. You did well, Seraphine said. It was the first compliment she had given him. He respects strength, or at least he recognizes it. He recognizes he needs bigger guns, Nixara grunted. She sat down on the floor and began to strip off her gauntlet. Her arm underneath was bruised, the fur matted with dried blood. Kala, I need a patch. That last drone had a kinetic kicker. Kala moved to her sister, opening a medical kit from her belt. Will watched as she worked. Her hands were efficient, cleaning the wound, applying a dermal regenerator. We cannot stay here, Kala said, quietly as she worked. Rafe will not send drones next time. He will level the floor. The storm is peaking, Seraphine said, looking out the window. No air transport can dock for at least 4 hours. We are grounded. 4 hours, Nixara hissed, wincing as Kala sealed the wound. We have held positions for days against the Void Stalkers. We can hold a hallway for 4 hours. Not with a civilian, Seraphine pointed out. She looked at Will. And not with a crownling who passes out after one burst. Kala finished the bandage and looked up. She caught Will's eye. He was still holding Pip's hand. She stood up and walked over to him. She didn't look like a warrior now. She looked exhausted. You are tired, Kala said. I'm terrified, Will corrected. There's a difference. Kala sat down next to him, leaning her back against the wall, shoulder to shoulder with him. Most men run from the feral court. We are death. We are the sharp end of the universe. But you invited us in. You yelled at Nixara. She broke my coffee maker, Will mumbled. Kala smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, reaching her golden eyes. You handle the fear well, Will. You do not let it drive. I used to work on the fusion cores, Will said quietly. If you panic there, you melt. You learn to just keep your hands steady. My hands are not always steady, Kala admitted, looking at her own fingers. I am tired of the running, Will. The hunting. The feral court, we are honor-bound, yes. But sometimes I wonder if we are just weapons waiting to be broken. She turned her head to look at him. Their faces were inches apart. He could smell the ozone on her armor, and underneath that a scent like warm spice and rain. "You made Pip feel safe," Calla whispered. "You make this wreck of a room feel safe." "It's the walls," Will joked weakly. "I told you they're good walls." Calla didn't laugh. She reached out and touched the back of his hand, the one holding Pip's. Her skin was cool soft. She didn't trigger the bond. She just held his hand. "You are not afraid of the soft things," Calla said. "That is what Rafe does not understand. He thinks softness is a crack in the armor. You know it is the glue that holds the armor together." Will looked at her. For a moment, the war outside didn't exist. There was just the hum of the backup lights and the golden eyes of a woman who was learning that she didn't always have to be a knife. Across the room, Seraphine watched them. Her expression was unreadable, but her tail flicked with agitation. "Sentiment," Seraphine muttered to herself. "It kills faster than a bullet." But she didn't interrupt them. "Seraphine," Nixara's voice broke the moment. She was standing by the sensor array Calla had set up earlier. "You need to see this." Calla pulled her hand away. Will felt the loss of contact immediately. "What is it?" Seraphine asked, striding over. "I am running a diagnostic on the bond," Nixara said, pointing at the holographic display. "Trying to find the frequency to separate the human from the boy." And I found a ghost signal," Nixara said. Her voice was grim. "Look at the waveform. It is embedded in the link itself." Calla joined them, her eyes scanning the data. She gasped. "What?" Will asked, sensing the shift in the room. "What's wrong?" Calla turned to him, her face pale. "The bond," she said. "The mark on your hand. It is not just a connection to Pip. It is a transmitter." "A transmitter?" Will looked at his hand. "Rafe didn't just find us because of the null purr," Calla said, horror growing in her voice. "The moment you touched Pip, the moment the bond formed, it created a quantum entanglement signature. Rafe has the other end of the frequency." Seraphine swore a harsh, guttural sound in her native tongue. "He is tracking the bond itself." "So, turn it off," Will said. "Block it." "We can't," Calla said. "It is biological. It is in your nerves. As long as you are the anchor, as long as you are connected to Pip, Rafe knows exactly where you are. To within a millimeter." "And if we cut the bond?" Will asked. Calla looked at Pip sleeping peacefully. "If we sever the bond now, violently, Pip's mind will have nowhere to ground the null per energy. He will detonate. He will die." "So," Will said, standing up slowly, "if I stay with him, Rafe finds us. If I leave him, he dies." "We are not besieged," Seraphine said, her voice hollow. "We are tagged livestock. Then we stop hiding," Will said. He grabbed his wrench from the floor. The weight of it felt good solid. "If he knows where we are, let's go somewhere he doesn't want to follow." "Where?" Nixara asked. "The roof is blocked. The hall is a trap." "Down," Will said. "We go down. To the wind core." "The ventilation turbine," Seraphine asked. "That is suicide. The pressure alone." "I'm a mechanic," Will said, a hard grin forming on his face. "I know how to shut it off. And I know that the wind tunnels have lead lining to dampen the vibration. Lead blocks signals." Seraphine looked at him. She calculated the odds. She looked at the drones on the floor. She looked at Calla, who nodded. "We go down," Seraphine decided. "Pack the gear. We are leaving the den." Will looked around his apartment one last time. He knew he would never see it again. He looked at the broken coffee maker. "Goodbye, old friend," Will whispered. He picked up Pip, wrapping the boy in the blanket. Pip stirred, but didn't wake. "Let's go," Will said. "Before I realize how stupid this is." They moved to the door. Nixara planted a charge on the lock. 3, 2, 1. The door blew outward. and the feral court with their mechanic and their crownling stepped out into the neon-lit crossfire. The hallway of level 112 smelled of burnt wiring and imminent violence. The blast door of Will's apartment was currently holding, but the structural integrity was a polite fiction at best. Inside, the air was heavy with the ozone scent of discharged plasma weapons and the deeper, earthier smell of fear. "We cannot stay here," Kala repeated, her golden eyes, scanning the scrolling data on her visor. "The signal masking from the storm is degrading. Rafe has triangulated the general sector. Once the wind dies down, he will not send drones. He will send a breaching team with gravity rams." "Then we leave," Nixara said, pacing the small living room like a caged tiger. She kicked a piece of shrapnel from the earlier drone attack. "We go to the roof. We jump. We find a new hole." "We cannot jump," Seraphine said, her voice ice cold. She stood by the window, peering through the slat in the shutters. "The storm is a Category 5. The wind shear alone would strip the flesh from your bones before you hit the next tower. And the boy—" She glanced at Pip, who was curled up on the rug, clutching a nutrient block. "The boy cannot survive the exposure. So we are trapped," Will said. He was kneeling on the floor, packing a canvas tool bag. He threw in a laser cutter, a hydrospanner, and a roll of industrial duct tape. "Unless we stop him from seeing us," Kala turned to him. "Explain." "The tracking," Will said, standing up. "You said Rafe is tracking the bond between me and Pip. He is using the building's sensor grid to boost the signal, right?" "Correct," Kala nodded. "The spire is a smart structure. Every light bulb, every vent, every door lock is a node. Rafe has subverted the local grid. He is using the building itself as a microphone to listen to your neural resonance." "Then we blind the building," Will said. He hoisted the heavy bag onto his shoulder. "The central processing hub for this sector isn't in the server room. It's in the wind core." "The turbine shaft," Seraphine frowned. "That is infrastructure, not data." "In the spire wind is power," Will said, feeling a surge of professional confidence. This was his world. "The wind core regulates the pressure, the power generation, and the environmental sensors. All the data lines run through the cooling systems in the core to keep from overheating. If we get in there, we can physically sever the hardline connection to the sector grid. We turn 112B into a dead zone. No sensors, no signal. Rafe goes blind." Seraphine considered this. Her blue eyes calculated risk versus reward in a microsecond. "It is a tactical blackout. I like it. But the core is a restricted zone. Heavy security." "I have a key," Will said, tapping the ID badge clipped to his belt. "And I know the maintenance routes. The ones the security drones don't patrol because they're too dirty." "I will go," Seraphine stated, adjusting her gauntlets. "Nixara, you hold the perimeter here. Kala, you stay with the boy." "No," Will said firmly. Seraphine turned to him, her expression dangerous. "Excuse me." "You don't know the core," Will said, meeting her gaze. "It's a maze of high-pressure turbines and magnetic fields. One wrong step and you get turned into red paste. And you don't know how to bypass the hydraulic locks without tripping the silent alarm." "I do." "You are a civilian," Seraphine said dismissively. "You will slow me down." "I am the only reason you're getting inside without blowing the place up and alerting the whole city," Will countered. "I'm going," Nixara snorted from the corner. "The mechanic has claws. Dull ones, but claws nonetheless." "He is right, Seraphine," Kala interjected softly. "The interface will be manual. I can hack the software, but someone needs to manipulate the hardware. And the bond." She pointed to Will's hand. "If Will leaves the sector, the signal moves. If he stays here, the signal stays here. If he goes to the core, Rafe might think he is fleeing and redirect his forces, buying us time." Seraphine stared at Will for a long moment. Finally, she gave a sharp nod. "Fine. You are the guide. But if you lag behind, I carry you. If you jeopardize the mission, I leave you." "Deal," Will said. He turned to look at Pip. The boy was watching them with wide, terrified eyes. He knew something was happening. He knew Will was leaving. Will knelt down. "Hey, buddy." Pip scrambled forward and grabbed the front of Will's shirt. His small claws hooked into the fabric. "No, do not go. The loud men are coming." "I have to go to stop the loud men," Will said, keeping his voice steady. "I need to turn off the lights so they can't find us. But I need you to stay here. It's too dangerous where I'm going, too loud for your ears." "I will be alone," Pip whispered. "No," Will said. He looked at the door. "Nora." The door to the bathroom where Will had unceremoniously shoved his neighbor earlier creaked open. Nora Penn stood there looking like she wanted to be literally anywhere else in the galaxy. She was holding a toilet brush like a weapon. "I am not part of this," Nora hissed. "I am a dental assistant. I do not do sieges." "Nora, listen to me," Will said, standing up and walking over to her. "You are the toughest person on this floor. You survived the Great Flu of 22, and you survived living next to me playing loud jazz at 2 in the morning. I need you to watch him." "He is an alien fugitive," Nora whispered furiously. "And there are ninja cats in your living room." "He is a kid," Will said. "And he is scared. Just sit with him. Feed him the soy noodles. If anything tries to come through that door, Nixara will turn it into confetti before it touches you. You just keep him calm." Nora looked at Pip. The boy looked back, his ears drooping, his tail wrapped around his ankles. Nora sighed a long, ragged sound of defeat. "Fine. But you owe me 200 credits now. And you are fixing my sink." "Deal," Will said. He turned back to Pip. "See, Nora is in charge. She's terrifying. You'll be safe." Pip looked at Will. "You come back?" "I promise," Will said. He placed his hand, the one with the glowing bond, on Pip's shoulder. A spark of warmth passed between them. "I'm just going to fix a fuse. I always come back from a job." Will stood up and looked at Seraphine. "Let's go." The entrance to the maintenance shafts was located behind a panel in the hallway that looked like a garbage chute. Will pried it open with his wrench, revealing a dark, rusted ladder leading down into the bowels of the spire. "Classy," Nixara muttered, peering into the gloom. "It smells like dead water." "It's the gray water recycling line," Will said, climbing in. "Keeps the sensors blind. The humidity messes with the optics." Nixara stayed behind to guard the apartment door. It was just Will, Seraphine, and Kala descending into the darkness. The journey was a nightmare of claustrophobia. The shafts were narrow, designed for repair drones, not humans, and certainly not 7-foot-tall Aluwari warriors in full combat armor. Will led them through a labyrinth of pipes and conduits, moving with the practiced ease of someone who had spent 10 years navigating the spire's guts. "Turn left here," Will whispered, his voice echoing slightly in the metal tube. "Watch the steam vent. It cycles every 30 seconds. Seraphine moved behind him, silent as a shadow. Kala brought up the rear, her visor casting a faint green glow on the slime-slicked walls. "You move well for a human," Seraphine commented. It sounded almost like an accusation. "I know the rhythm of the building," Will said, ducking under a high-voltage cable. "You treat the spire like a battlefield. I treat it like a machine. Machines have rules." "War has rules too," Seraphine said. "Rule 1, survive." "Rule 1 of maintenance," Will corrected. "Don't touch the red wire." They reached a heavy circular hatch marked Wind Core, authorized personnel only. The warning sign was faded, covered in graffiti. Will hooked his datapad to the lock interface. "Okay, this is the hard part. The pressure differential on the other side is massive. When I open this, hold onto something." "We are anchored," Kala said. Her boots made a metallic thunk as she engaged her magnetic soles. Will typed in the code. The lock hissed. He spun the wheel. With a groan of tortured metal, the hatch swung inward. The sound hit them first. It was a roar, a physical wall of noise that vibrated in the marrow of their bones. It was the sound of 1,000,000 cubic feet of air being forced through a turbine the size of a city block. Will grabbed the handrail and pulled himself through. They stepped out onto a narrow gantry, suspended over a vast cylindrical chasm. Above and below them, darkness stretched into infinity. In the center of the shaft, massive turbine blades, each hundreds of feet long, spun with a terrifying slow grace. Blue lightning arced between the blades, and the containment walls, static discharge from the friction of the wind. "The wind core!" Will shouted over the roar. "The heart of the beast." "It is significant," Seraphine admitted, shouting to be heard. She looked down at the drop. "Where is the data hub?" "Central column." Will pointed to the axis of the turbines. A thick pillar of metal ran down the center, connected to the outer walls by service bridges. "The cooling fluid for the server farm runs through there. We need to bridge the connection manually." They began to run across the gantry. The wind whipped at them, tearing at Will's clothes. The Iluwari armor was aerodynamic, the wind sliding off it, but Will had to fight every step. "Movement!" Kala shouted, her voice amplified by her helmet speakers. 3 o'clock high, Will looked up. Descending from the shadows of the upper machinery were drones. But these weren't the small scout drones from the apartment. These were heavy lifters, industrial maintenance drones repurposed for combat. They had welding torches and gripping claws strong enough to crush steel beams. "They are part of the Corps' automated defense," Will yelled. "Rafe must have triggered the intruder alert." "I will handle the scrap metal," Seraphine said, drawing her curved blade. The metal glowed with energy. "Get Kala to the terminal." Seraphine launched herself into the air. She didn't fly. She used the wind. She leaped from the railing, catching an updraft, her armor's stabilizers flaring. She landed on the back of the nearest drone, driving her blade into its central processor. The machine sparked and spiraled down into the abyss. "Show off," Will muttered, pushing forward. He and Kala reached the central column. There was a control panel embedded in the wall, covered in a thick layer of grime. "I need to bypass the physical lock," Will shouted. He jammed his wrench into the panel's casing and heaved. The metal popped open. "Kala, you're up!" Kala jacked a cable from her wrist into the port. Her visor lit up with a waterfall of code. "I am in. The encryption is dense. Rafe has layered his own debt protocols over the system. It is not just a lock. It is a ledger." "What does that mean?" Will asked, watching Seraphine dismantle another drone in midair. "It means every system in this building owes him processing power," Kala said, her fingers twitching in the air as she manipulated the virtual interface. "He has bought the loyalty of the logic gates. I have to outbid him." "Can you do it?" "I am a crypto-architect of the Feral Court," Kala said, her voice tight. "I do not bid. I steal." Suddenly, the lights on the gantry slammed from amber to a harsh blood red. A hologram flickered into existence on the platform in front of them. It was a man. He was tall, wearing a suit that cost more than Will's entire lifetime of earnings. His face was handsome, but part of his jaw was replaced by a sleek chrome prosthetic. Rafe called her. The hologram was translucent, flickering in the wind, but the sneer was high definition. "Mr. Vance," Rafe's voice boomed over the Corps' PA system, cutting through the turbine roar. "And the lovely Kala, you are trespassing on corporate property. Again." "We're just doing some unscheduled maintenance, Rafe," Will shouted, stepping in front of Kala to shield her while she worked. "You have a pest problem. We're clearing the bugs." "You are the bug, William," Rafe said smoothly. "You think you can cut the line. You think if you blind the sensors I won't find you. I own the water you drink. I own the air you are breathing right now. The debt is absolute." "The debt is fake," Will yelled back. "You manipulate the numbers to keep people hungry so they're too tired to fight back. You want silence because noise means people are alive." "Silence is order," Rafe said. He walked, or his hologram simulated walking toward Will. "The boy Pip is the ultimate silence. A pure, clean slate. With his null purr, I can silence dissent before it is even spoken. I can quell riots with a single pulse. Think of the peace, Will. Peace, Will laughed a harsh, barking sound. That's not peace. That's a coma. You don't want to save the city. You want to lobotomize it. I am offering you a choice, Rafe said. Step away from the console. Let the girl stop her hacking. I will let you walk out of here. I will even let you keep your little apartment walls. And Pip, Will asked. Pip comes to me, Rafe said. Unharmed, whole. Will looked at the hologram. He looked at the chrome jaw, the dead eyes. Then he looked at Calla, who was sweating, her hands shaking as she fought the code. Hey, Rafe, Will said. Yes. You forgot to factor in the variable cost, Will said. What variable? Stubbornness, Will grinned. Calla now. Calla slammed her hand onto the console. Cut, a massive boom echoed through the shaft. The blue lightning arced wildly. The lights on the gantry died, plunging them into darkness, illuminated only by the sparks of the dying drones. Sensor grid offline, Calla shouted. We are a black hole. Rafe's hologram flickered violently. You insolent rat! The image vanished. We did it, Will cheered. Crack. The sound was different from the machinery. It was sharp, precise. A high-velocity kinetic round. Will felt a punch to his chest. It didn't hurt at first. It just felt like someone had hit him with a hammer. He stumbled back, gasping. Will! Calla screamed. He looked down. There was a hole in his maintenance vest. But there was no blood. He tapped his chest. The heavy steel plate of his multi-tool kit strapped across his chest had caught the round. It was dented hot to the touch, but it had held. Sniper! Seraphine's voice rang out from above. She dropped from the shadows, landing in front of Will and Calla. Her armor sparked as a second round slammed into her shoulder pauldron. She didn't flinch. High tier, Seraphine pointed. Platform 4, he is using a thermal scope. Will squinted. Far above, a glint of metal. A physical shooter. Rafe had sent a human assassin, knowing the drones might fail. We are pinned, Calla said, pulling Will behind a structural pillar. If we move to the ladder, he has a clear shot. We don't take the ladder, Will wheezed, his ribs aching from the impact. He looked at the massive turbine blades spinning below them. Will, Seraphine said, glancing at him. Do not tell me you are thinking what I think you are thinking. The updraft, Will said. The cooling vents open in 2 minutes. When they open, the pressure release creates a vertical wind stream of 100 miles per hour. It goes straight to the roof exhaust. We ride the wind, Calla asked, her eyes wide. Without gliders. We have gravity boots, Will said. And we have Seraphine. She can steer. This is madness, Seraphine said. But she was smiling. It was a terrifying, feral smile. I like it. 2 minutes, Will shouted. We have to hold for 2 minutes. The sniper fired again. The bullet chipped the concrete pillar inches from Will's face. Concrete dust sprayed into his eyes. Nixara would be jealous that she is missing this, Seraphine said. She stepped out from cover, her gauntlet, raising a hard light shield. Calla, prep the jump will give me the timing. 90 seconds, Will checked his chrono. Wait for the green light on the central axis. The next minute was an eternity. Seraphine stood like a bulwark absorbing fire. Her shield flared and flickered under the assault. Calla held on to Will, her hand gripping his arm so tight it bruised. He is using armor-piercing rounds, Seraphine grunted. My shield is at 20%. 30 seconds, Will yelled. Get ready to jump on my mark. He looked at the central column. A small indicator light turned from red to yellow. The turbine blades began to pitch, changing their angle. The roar deepened, becoming a howl. 10 seconds! The sniper adjusted his aim, realizing their plan. He targeted the gantry supports. Bang! Bang! The metal groaned. The floor beneath them tilted. Now! Will screamed as the light turned green. Jump! Seraphine commanded. She grabbed Will by the back of his vest. Calla grabbed his arm. Together they leaped off the gantry straight into the center of the shaft. For a second, they fell. The darkness swallowed them. Then the vents opened. A wall of air solid as a fist slammed into them from below. It didn't crush them. It caught them. The updraft was immense. They shot upward, accelerating like bullets. "Stabilize!" Seraphine roared. She extended the flaps on her armor, creating drag. She became a kite, and Will and Calla were the tail. They rocketed past the sniper's nest. Will saw the assassin, a figure in gray tactical gear, stare in disbelief as they flew past him, riding the column of air. Yeehaw! Will couldn't help himself. The adrenaline was pure electricity in his veins. They shot up past level 50, level 80, level 100. "Exit coming up," Will shouted. "Maintenance hatch sector B." Seraphine banked hard, fighting the turbulence. She aimed for a side tunnel, a ventilation exhaust that led back to the residential corridors. "Brace for impact," Calla warned. They hit the grate at 60 miles per hour. Seraphine took the brunt of it, crashing through the metal mesh. They tumbled into a pile of dust and old insulation foam skidding along the metal floor until friction finally stopped them. Will lay on his back staring at the ceiling. He was alive. His ribs hurt. He was covered in soot. "That," Calla gasped, lying next to him, "was inefficient, but effective." Seraphine stood up, shaking dust from her armor. "We are alive. The sensor grid is dead. Mission accomplished." Will sat up, groaning. "Let's not do that again without coffee first." They scrambled back to the apartment. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Will ran to his door. It was battered, scorched, but closed. "Nora," Will pounded on the metal. "It's me." The door opened. Nora Penn stood there. She was disheveled, holding the toilet brush in one hand and a half-eaten nutrient block in the other. Pip was sitting on the sofa, unharmed, watching a static-filled screen. "You are late," Nora said, her voice trembling. "And he ate all the blue blocks." Will rushed past her and scooped Pip up in a hug. "I told you. I always come back." Pip buried his face in Will's neck. "The lights went out," the boy whispered. But Nora sang a song. It was bad singing, but it helped. "Hey," Nora protested weakly. Nixara stepped out of the shadows of the kitchen. She looked bored, but her knives were drawn. "You cut the feed. Good. The drones outside just stopped. They are hovering like confused bees." "Rafe is blind," Seraphine said, entering the room and locking the door behind her. "But he is not deaf. He knows we are here, and he knows we just embarrassed him." Will put Pip down. He looked at the group. His apartment was a ruin. His neighbor was armed with bathroom supplies. 3 alien assassins were using his living room as a command post, and a corporate warlord was coming for them. "He's not sending drones anymore," Will said, the realization settling heavy in his gut. "He's coming himself, with everything he has." "Yes," Seraphine said. She walked to the window and looked out at the storm-lashed city. The neon lights were flickering, confused by the blackout Will had caused. "The sensor blackout bought us maybe an hour before he reroutes the hard lines." Seraphine turned to face them. Her face was grim, resolved. "Tonight the game changes. We are no longer hiding. We are holding ground." She looked at Will. "We can try to run Will. We can take the service tunnels to the lower depths. We might lose him for a day, maybe 2. But he will burn this spire down to find the boy." "Or," Will asked. "Or we turn this apartment into a kill box," Seraphine said. "We make him pay for every step he takes down that hallway. We make the cost of the debt so high that even he cannot afford it." "Battlefield," Nixara grinned, clicking her knives together. Finally, Will looked at Pip. The boy was looking at him, trusting him. He looked at Calla, who gave him a small, tired nod. He looked at Nora, who was terrified but hadn't run away. Will picked up his wrench. He weighed it in his hand. I'm tired of running, Will said. And I'm tired of people breaking my house. He looked Seraphine in the eye. Let's make him regret coming to level 112, Will said. We fight, Seraphine smiled. It was the first time Will had seen her smile. It was sharp, dangerous, and absolutely terrifying. Then let us prepare, Seraphine said. The storm is here. The storm outside the Gleam Spire had turned into a solid wall of shrieking wind and acidic rain. But inside the hallway of level 112, the atmosphere was even more volatile. The air tasted of ozone copper and the static charge of impending violence. Will Vance was on his knees by the ruined doorway of his apartment, fusing a high-voltage cable to the metal frame of the floor. His hands were steady, moving with the practiced rhythm of a man who had spent his life fixing things that did not want to be fixed. You are making a web, Nixara observed. She was crouching on top of the overturned refrigerator, which had been dragged into the living room to serve as a barricade. She was sharpening her combat knife, the rhythmic shing-shing sound cutting through the tension. It is not a web, Will corrected, twisting a wire nut with his teeth. It is an inductive loop. If anyone steps on the welcome mat wearing powered armor, this cable will turn their magnetic seals into a reverse polarity magnet. They will be stuck to the floor like a fridge magnet. You fight, dirty mechanic, Nixara grinned, her amber eyes flashing in the dim emergency light. I approve. I don't fight, Will said, standing up and wiping grease on his trousers. I maintain. And right now, I am maintaining the structural integrity of my life against a man who wants to erase it. Alert! Kettle's voice crackled from the ceiling, speakers sounding distorted and strained. Proximity sensors are overwhelmed. I detect 12 distinct heartbeats in the stairwell, heavy infantry, and one artificial signature. Rafe, Seraphine said. She stood in the center of the room, a pillar of matte black calm amidst the chaos. He has brought his personal guard, the debt collectors. They are not here to collect money, Calla said softly. She was in the corner, her body curled around Pip. The boy was shivering, his eyes squeezed shut, his small hands gripping his ears, as if trying to block out a sound only he could hear. They are here to foreclose on breathing. Will looked at the traps he had set. A gravity lock rigged to the fire suppression system. A steam vent bypass connected to the pressure valve. It was a jury-rigged nightmare of industrial accidents waiting to happen. Kettle, Will said. Route all remaining power to the hallway dampeners. When I give the signal, blow the fuses. That will fry my logic core, Will, Kettle protested weakly. I will be reduced to a toaster with a speech impediment. If we die, you won't even be a toaster, Will said. You'll be scrap. Valid point, Kettle sighed. Routing power. It has been an honor serving as your domestic supervisor, Will, even if your dietary choices were questionable. Boom! The blast door at the end of the hallway exploded inward. It wasn't a warning shot. The entire frame of the corridor buckled as a concussive wave slammed into the apartment. The windows rattled in their frames. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Contact! Seraphine roared. The hallway filled with smoke and the crimson glare of tactical lasers. Through the haze, armored figures advanced, hulking shapes encased in gray corporate enforcement gear. They moved in a phalanx, shields up, weapons raised. Hold! Will shouted. Wait for the mat! The lead soldier stepped onto the welcome mat. Snap. The inductive loop triggered. A blue arc of electricity screamed from the floor, latching onto the soldier's boots. The magnetic polarity reversed instantly. With a sound like a car crash, the soldier was slammed, face first, into the metal floor plates, pinned by his own armor. The soldier behind him tripped over the body. Now! Will yelled. Kettle, blow the steam! A valve above the door burst open. Superheated steam, pressurized to 600 pounds per square inch, roared into the hallway. The soldiers screamed a muffled, terrifying sound through their helmets as the heat blinded their sensors and cooked their optics. Feral cord engage, Seraphine commanded. Nixara launched herself from the refrigerator. She didn't run, she flowed. She was a blur of orange and red violence diving into the steam. The sounds of metal tearing and plasma discharging filled the air. Seraphine stood at the threshold, her curved blade deflecting laser bolts with impossible precision. Every movement was efficient, calculated. She wasn't fighting. She was editing the battlefield, removing variables one by one. But there were too many of them. Suppression fire! A voice bellowed from the hall. Rafe's voice, amplified and distorted. A drone flew over the steam, immune to the heat. It locked onto Will. "Will down!" Kala screamed. She leaped from the corner, tackling Will just as the drone fired. A micro-rocket slammed into the wall, where Will's head had been a second ago, showering them with plaster and hot shrapnel. Kala groaned, her body jerking as debris hit her back. Kala. Will scrambled to check her. Her armor was cracked, a line of purple blood seeping from her shoulder. "I am fine," she gasped, her golden eyes locking onto his. "Just structural damage." "You took a rocket for me," Will said, his voice trembling. "You are the anchor," Kala whispered, her hand gripping his maintenance shirt. "If the anchor breaks, the ship is lost." In the corner, Pip stood up. The chaos of the battle, the screams, the explosions, the roar of the steam had pushed him over the edge. His eyes snapped open, and they were no longer violet. They were white, pure, blinding white. The Nullpur began. It didn't start as a wave. It started as an absence. The sound of the machine gun fire vanished. The roar of the wind outside ceased. The screaming of the soldiers stopped. It wasn't just silence. It was a void. Will felt his heart skip a beat, then another. He looked at Kala. She was moving her mouth, shouting something, but no sound came out. The air in the room felt thick like gelatin. Gravity seemed to lose its hold. Small pieces of debris began to float. Pip was levitating a few inches off the floor. His mouth was open in a silent scream, his small body vibrating with terrifying energy. He wasn't just dampening sound. He was dampening reality. Will felt his memories begin to slip. He looked at the wrench in his hand, and for a second, he didn't know what it was. What is this tool? Who am I? The soldier, pinned to the floor in the hallway, stopped struggling. His eyes went blank behind his visor. He had forgotten why he was fighting. The drift, Kala's voice echoed in Will's mind, not through his ears, but through the bond on his hand. The mark was burning like a brand. "He is erasing the context. Will, you have to anchor him. He is dissolving." Will fought the fog in his brain. He looked at Pip. The boy was becoming translucent, his edges blurring into the white light. "Pip. His name is Pip. I found him on the railing. I need to catch him." Will forced his body to move. It felt like walking through deep water. He crawled across the floor, ignoring the floating debris, ignoring the soldiers who stood like statues in the hallway. He reached Pip. The energy field around the boy was freezing cold. It burned Will's skin, blistering his fingers. "Pip!" Will screamed. He couldn't hear himself, but he felt the vibration in his throat. He grabbed the boy. He pulled the small, vibrating body into his chest, wrapping his arms around him. "I have you." Will projected the thought, pouring every ounce of his stubbornness into the bond. "I'm here. We are in apartment 112B. I am Will. You are Pip. We are real." The white light flared blindingly bright, and then snap. The silence broke. Sound rushed back into the room with the force of a thunderclap. The air pressure normalized. Gravity slammed everything back to the floor. Pip collapsed in Will's arms, sobbing. The soldiers in the hallway groaned, shaking their heads, disoriented. But the doorway was no longer filled with steam. Standing there, stepping over the bodies of his confused men, was Rafe Calder. He looked impeccable. His suit was untouched by the battle. His chrome jaw glinted in the emergency lights. He held a heavy pistol in one hand, aimed directly at Will's head. Behind him, two massive combat drones hovered, their weapons charged and spinning. "Impressive," Rafe said. His voice was calm, cultured, and utterly devoid of humanity. That was a near-total cognitive wipe. If he gets any stronger, he will be able to reset a human brain to factory settings. Seraphine and Nixara were getting up from the floor, shaking off the effects of the null purr. They raised their weapons, but the drones instantly locked onto them. "Don't," Rafe warned, not looking away from Will. "My drones have a reaction time of 0.03 seconds. You will be dead before you twitch." He stepped into the living room. He looked at the wreckage of Will's life, the broken furniture, the scorched walls. "This ends now, Will," Rafe said. "The game is over. You have no traps left. You have no tricks." He pointed the gun at Pip, who was buried in Will's chest. "Give me the asset," Rafe said, "and I will let you live. That is the deal. Life for property." Will looked up. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. His clothes were torn. He was exhausted down to his soul. He looked at Rafe. Then he looked at Pip. "He's not property," Will rasped. "He's a child." "He is a weapon," Rafe corrected. "A weapon that you are too sentimental to use. Look at you. You are a mechanic living in a box. You are nothing. Give him to me and you can go back to fixing toilets. You can survive." Will tightened his hold on Pip. He felt the boy's small heart beating against his own, rapid, terrified, but alive. "Survive?" Will asked. He slowly stood up, lifting Pip with him. He didn't back away. He stood his ground. "You think living is just breathing, just eating and sleeping and not dying?" "That is the definition, yes," Rafe sneered. "No," Will said. He looked Rafe in the eye. "Living is choosing. Living is deciding what matters. If I give him to you, if I let you turn him into a battery for your silence, then I'm not living. I'm just a part of your machine." Will took a step forward, right into the barrel of the gun. "So go ahead," Will said softly. "Shoot me. But you'll have to pry him from my dead hands. And I promise you, I have a very strong grip." Rafe's eyes narrowed. His finger tightened on the trigger. "You are a fool," Rafe hissed. "A sentimental, obsolete fool." "Will," Kalla's voice came from behind him. She stepped up beside him. She wasn't wearing her helmet. Her face was bruised, but her golden eyes were fierce. She placed her hand on Will's arm. "You are not a fool," Kalla said to Will, ignoring the gun pointed at them. "You are magnificent." She looked at Rafe. "You want a weapon, debt hunter." "You are looking at the wrong one," Kalla squeezed Will's arm. "Will the bond. Do not suppress it. Push it. Give him everything." "What?" Will asked. "Pip," Kalla shouted. "Sing," Rafe fired. The bullet left the barrel, but it never reached Will. Pip's eyes opened, but this time they weren't violet. They weren't white. They were gold. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He looked at Rafe and he pushed. The null purr that erupted wasn't a wave of silence. It was a wave of dissonance. It was the sound of 1,000 broken chains snapping at once. The bullet stopped in midair, vibrating violently, and then disintegrated into metal dust. The drones behind Rafe didn't just shut down. They exploded. Their power cores overloaded, instantly showering the hallway with sparks. Rafe screamed. He dropped the gun and clutched his chrome jaw. The prosthetic was vibrating, heating up. The technology that kept his face together was rejecting the signal. "Make it stop!" Rafe shrieked, falling to his knees. The noise, it burns. Pip wasn't hurting him. Pip was simply broadcasting a frequency that technology couldn't process. It was the frequency of pure, chaotic life. "Seraphine!" Will shouted. Now, Seraphine moved. Without the drones to check her, she was a goddess of war. She crossed the room in a heartbeat. She didn't use her blade. She used her gauntleted fist. Crack. She struck Rafe across the face, shattering the chrome jaw and knocking him unconscious before he hit the floor. The null purr faded instantly. Silence returned to the room. But it was a normal silence, the silence of aftermath. Pip slumped against Will asleep, before he even closed his eyes. Will looked around. The drones were smoking wreckages. Rafe was out cold. The soldiers in the hallway were groaning, trying to reboot their armor. "It is done," Nixara said, kicking Rafe's pistol away. "The loud man is quiet." Will sank to the floor, holding Pip. He let out a laugh that sounded suspiciously like a sob. "We did it. We actually did it." He looked at Calla. She was smiling at him, a soft, tired smile. "You make me want to be more than a weapon, William Vance," Calla whispered. She reached out and brushed the hair from his forehead. "You make me want to be a shield." Will leaned into her touch. "I think you're both." Touching moment, Seraphine's voice cut through the air, sharp, cold. Will looked up. Seraphine was standing over Rafe's body. She had her blade drawn, but she wasn't looking at Rafe. She was looking at Will. And for the first time, Will saw something in her eyes that chilled him more than the storm outside. It was regret. "Secure the prisoner," Seraphine said to Nixara. "Tie him up, and call the Spire authorities. Tell them we have a confession recorded on his own internal drive." "And the human?" Nixara asked. Her voice was uncharacteristically quiet. She didn't look at Will. Seraphine turned to face Will completely. She raised her blade. "Seraphine?" Will asked, confused. "What are you doing? It's over." "The mission regarding the debt hunter is over," Seraphine said. "But the mission of the Feral Court is not." Calla stepped in front of Will, blocking Seraphine's path. "No, Seraphine. Do not do this." "Stand aside, Calla," Seraphine ordered. "You know the law. You know why we were sent." "What law?" Will stood up, still holding the sleeping Pip. "What are you talking about?" "You think we came here to save the boy?" Seraphine asked. Her voice was tight, as if the words hurt her. "We did. But we also came for you." "Me." "The Feral Court does not allow crownlings to be bonded to other species," Seraphine said. "The bond the mark on your hand is considered a security breach, a flaw. A human with access to the null purr is a variable we cannot tolerate. History has shown that anyone who controls a crownling eventually tries to use them, to become a tyrant." Will stared at her. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. "You didn't come to rescue me," Will whispered. "You came to judge me." "We came to execute you," Seraphine corrected. "The orders were clear. Retrieve the crownling. Eliminate the leak." Will looked at Nixara. The large warrior looked away, studying the floor. "That's why you challenged me," Will said to Nixara. "You wanted to see if I was power-hungry." "I wanted to see if you would fight for him," Nixara mumbled. "Or if you would use him to fight for you." "And that's why you were so cold," Will said to Seraphine. "You were waiting for me to slip up, to try and sell him, or use him." "Yes," Seraphine admitted. She looked at the blade in her hand. "If you had handed him to Rafe, if you had hesitated for 1 second, you would be dead right now. If you had tried to weaponize him, you would be dead." "But I didn't," Will said. "No." Seraphine lowered the sword slowly. "You didn't." She looked at Calla. "Calla saw it first. She argued for you. She said the bond was not a chain, but a lifeline." "It is," Calla said firmly. She took Will's hand, the one with the mark. "Look at the data, Seraphine. During the final surge, Will did not direct the power. He did not aim it. He just held the boy. He took the recoil so the boy wouldn't burn out. That is not the action of a master. It is the action of a father." Seraphine looked at Will. She looked at the battered mechanic who had rigged his own home to explode, rather than give up a child he had met 2 days ago. She sheathed her sword. The click echoed in the silent room. "The Feral Court values logic," Seraphine announced formally. "Logic dictates that a leak must be sealed. However," she looked at Rafe, trussed up on the floor, "logic also dictates that a fortress needs a commander, and a crownling needs a guardian." Seraphine knelt. It was a shocking gesture. She knelt on one knee, bowing her head slightly to Will. "The judgment is rendered," Seraphine said. "William Vance, you are no longer a leak. You are designated as keeper." Nixara let out a loud breath of relief. "Oh, thank the moons. I really did not want to kill him. He makes terrible coffee, but he is funny." Calla turned to Will, her eyes shining. "You are safe." Will sank back onto the sofa, his legs finally giving out. "You guys are complicated house guests." 2 days later. The storm had passed. The sky outside the balcony, now repaired with reinforced steel, was a clear, bruised purple. The air scrubbers were humming, finally clearing the smell of ozone and burnt wiring. Rafe Calder was gone. The authorities had taken him along with the damning recordings from his own drones. He wasn't dead, but in the corporate world being stripped of assets, and reputation was a fate worse than death. He would spend the rest of his life in a debtor's prison, listening to the silence of his own irrelevance. Will stood on the balcony holding a mug of coffee. A new coffee maker sat on the counter, inside a gift from Seraphine paid for with confiscated operational funds. "It is quiet," Calla said, stepping out to join him. She wasn't wearing her armor. She wore a simple tunic, one of Will's old shirts that she had modified. She looked softer, but no less dangerous. "Yeah," Will said. "Quiet is nice, when it's not trying to erase your memory." Inside the apartment, Pip was sitting on the floor, playing a board game with Nixara. Or rather, Nixara was trying to teach him how to cheat at cards, and Pip was laughing. Seraphine was by the door, calibrating a new security system. She had decided that the apartment's defenses were insulting and was upgrading them to military standards. "So," Will said, looking at Calla. "What now? The mission is over. Rafe is gone." "The mission has changed," Calla said. She leaned against the railing, the new, unbreakable railing. "Pip cannot go back to the feral court. He is too unique. And you are the keeper. You cannot be separated from him." Meaning we are not leaving," Calla smiled. "Seraphine has declared this apartment a diplomatic enclave of the feral court. We are your permanent security detail." Will choked on his coffee. "Permanent, in a one-bedroom apartment." "We are adaptable," Calla said. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers interlaced with his. The bond on his hand hummed a warm, contented vibration. "And, besides, I have found that I like the walls here. They hold good things." Will looked at her. He looked at the chaos inside his living room. He thought about his quiet, boring life before the cat child fell from the sky. "I'm going to need a bigger couch," Will said. "And more noodles," Nixara shouted from inside. "The boy eats like a black hole." "Still adorable," Nixara sighed, looking around the cramped, battered apartment. Will smiled. He squeezed Calla's hand. "I'm going to hang a sign on the door," Will said. "No more surprises." Calla laughed, the sound mingling with the wind of the spire. "Oh, William, you know that sign would be a lie." "Yeah," Will admitted, looking at the strange, dangerous, beautiful family that had invaded his life. "But I think I can handle the surprises now." He took a sip of coffee. It was perfect. "Kettle," Will said. "Play some jazz." "With pleasure, Will," the AI replied. "And may I say it is good to have the house full." As the music started, Will turned back to the city, his hand in Calla's, ready for whatever the sky decided to drop on him next.